What's going on, y'all? My name is Grayson Russell.
Hey, it's Presley Tunnett here.
Hey everybody, Robbie Johnson here.
This is Darian Lee.
Hey y'all, this is Billy Joe Jones.
My name is Rye Rivers.
Hi, I'm Chloe Styler, and you are listening to The Jay Franzi Show.
Be sure to enjoy it.
Thank y'all.
Welcome to The Jay Franzi Show, a behind-the-curtain look at the entertainment industry with insights you can't pay for and stories you've never heard. Now, here's your host, Jay Franzi and Tiffany Mason.
And we are coming at you live. I am Jay Franzi, and with me tonight, the Elaine to my Jerry, my beautiful co-host, Miss Tiffany Mason.
Well, good evening.
If you are new to the show, this is your source for the latest news, reviews, and interviews. And if you'd like to join in, comment, or fire off any questions, please head over to jfranzi.com. All right, my friend, tonight we have a very special guest with us. We have a country music recording artist. Hailing from the great state of Tennessee, we have Mary Kutter. Mary, my friend, how are you?
I'm doing great. I can't complain. I'm so excited to be here, y'all. Thanks for having me.
It is our pleasure. I know we have a limited amount of time tonight, so let's just jump right in. You, my friend, have apparently just signed a record deal. Can you tell us what that is like?
Oh, man, it feels pretty surreal, to be honest. It's something that you dream of. And I moved to Nashville from Kentucky, and I moved from a very small town. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of Bardstown. It's where all the bourbon's made. I grew up right outside of there. Back when I was a little girl, we used to drive there to get our groceries, just kind of give you a mind stamp up where it's at. But anyway, I just remember rolling into Nashville, and I didn't know anything about anything when it came to the music business, but I did know how to write songs, and that was how I got my start in Nashville, was mainly writing songs for other artists to sing. And I was lucky enough to have a couple friends, go on to get record deals. And heck, one of them, he's literally doing his first headlining tour at arenas right now, Zimmerman. And I was lucky enough to be, his friend in the beginning of the rise of his career. And so I've seen firsthand how, you're writing songs, you're posting them, you're playing shows, all this stuff. Then you sign a record deal, and in his case, obviously went great. It still is, and you can obviously see it the other way too with some folks. But I feel so great. I'm pumped. And actually, Dawn, I literally just got back. We were doing a video shoot tonight. That's why I was running in and going go. But said we were doing a video shoot right down. I don't know if y'all have been to Nashville or not. It's a very hill area, but that's where historically, for any of the viewers watching that maybe know their music history stuff, that's where a lot of the music studios used to be back in the day, apparently. Now they're kind of, I feel like since COVID, it's a little bit more scattered around, a lot of home studios now, but that's where we were shooting tonight. So it's been a heck of a ride.
So you mentioned you got your start writing songs in Nashville. So were any of those songs cut?
Uh-huh. Yeah, and I really do feel like that's probably what kind of started getting things moving a little bit for me in Nashville. I mentioned Bailey Zimmerman. I had a couple of songs with him, Never Leave, and I think that song's a gold record. And then his latest album, I wrote a song that I literally, whenever we wrote it, I texted it to him. And I said, hey, Bailey, I don't know, but I kind of feel like you sound great on this song. Now, Never Leave, he and I worked together, but these nights I was new to his album. That was an outside cut. I just figured he would sound great on it, and he did. And then Nate Smith, he's another artist in town. Had a couple songs with him. That was my first platinum record. It was a song called Wreckage. But let me tell you what's so wild, though. Wreckage, we wrote, it was the last writing session before Christmas. I remember Nashville, it turns into a ghost town, about a week before Christmas or so. And just about everybody was gone. But me and three other friends, Nate being one of them, we went over to one of our co-writers' house, and maybe 2 or 3 days before Christmas, and we wrote that song. And at that point, I don't think Nate even has a record deal at that point, but we were just writing a song that was close to the heart. And, you never know what a song's gonna do. And actually, speaking of songs, my first songwriting cut with Nate, I wrote right after the lockdown happened. Y'all remember back in 2020 when the world shut down. Oh my gosh. I remember first moved to Nashville. I was making money hosting different writers' nights. And, once again, for anyone who hasn't been to Nashville, I wasn't the person that started this type of show, but essentially what it is, you have 3 or 4 different folks on the guitar or keyboard, and they play their songs acoustic. And they tell the story behind their songs. It's really cool. But anyway, I was hosting different writers' nights in Nashville, just mainly in the local music scene. And whenever the world shut down, so did that. And I was like, what do I do now? Because like the music industry, we just thought on a dime. And he was like, well, Mary, you need to think about what you actually have control over and to do that. And I knew I could write songs, so I started to literally get on this computer every single day, 7 days a week. All through the lockdown, I would write at least 2 songs a day, and that would Zoom write with me. A lot of days for 3 days. That's all y'all were there. We all had our hobbies. That was about writing songs. And anyway, it was right at the top of the lockdown. I had went back to Kentucky for the first 2-3 months, and we didn't know what was going on. So I was up in Kentucky on the family farm, and one of the writers was in Virginia, one of them was in Tennessee, and then one of them was in California. And we hopped on the Zoom that day, and we started writing a song called Sleep. And that song was a true story. It's a heavy song. If you haven't heard it, look it up later. But it's the backstory of a time in Nate's life that had been pretty heavy. And he told us a story. At that point, we didn't know him, real well yet. But I said, y'all, I don't know about y'all, but I feel like we're going to write this song. Let's not hold anything back. Let's put it all in there. And we wrote the song, finished the Zoom, get off the, computer. Later that night, Nate was doing a live stream, kind of like this, on his Instagram or TikTok or whatever. And he's on there, and I'm just watching on the couch. And he's like, I just wrote this song today, let me know what you think. And so he starts playing Sleep, that day, and like I said, it was a good write. I wasn't thinking of it. Well, he got to the 3rd verse or bridge, and he started playing that, and the comment section just started exploding. And I was watching, I was like, I started getting goosebumps. And, I think it was, leaning into telling people's stories that seemed to resonate with people. And it seemed like, that was kind of the beginning of getting some songs, getting recorded and all that. But it was interesting. Once the world opened back up again in Nashville, I started getting calls from different producers and artists, folks that wanted to pull me into, there's an artist that just had her record deal this past year named Alexandra Kay. She's on a tour with Jelly Roll, great artist. She pulled me in to write her wedding song, and she's like, I know you're on board. I didn't hardly even know her, but now we know each other. But time and time again, it seemed like I was getting calls about that. Of course, I've always enjoyed telling stories, and fast forward, I didn't really have anything going artistry world yet, songs for me to sing. But I ended up writing a song about my great granddaddy, who was a bootlegger. And it's a true story. Right outside Bardstown, and he had been a bootlegger, but then part of that money that he made, he helped build a church. And so it's interesting. You think about the little squiggly lines that all of our lives lead. I guess Jay and Tiffany, you probably have the same situation, where this led to this, or this led to this, And it is really interesting looking back now, where, leading up to me singing the songs, I was telling stories all along. It just seems like now it's maybe, more geared towards, what I grew up with, or stories that I was told, as a little girl and that I've lived through.
Well, I have a question for you. They say Nashville's a 10-year town. So how long has it taken for you to get your quote unquote overnight success?
Well, I still feel like we're still in the middle of the night, sugar, but I will say that, I know I'm still honestly very early on.
Sure.
I do think that for literally the first 5 years, I was really purely just writing for other people. So it was kind of a totally different trajectory. I really started my artistry stuff just to give you a mindset. In 2023, I did 452 writing sessions. That's how many I did that year. Maybe 12 of them were for me as an artist. Now, in that year was when I wrote Devil's Money. And then I posted it during the holidays, back home for Christmas. It did what it did. Then 24 and 25, it was like, maybe there is something here, and most of 2024, I was still kind of, during the day, I was writing for other artists. And then at night and on the weekends, I was writing for me. And then midway through was when I was like, okay, I think it's time to kind of turn the page a little bit, start writing songs for me. Now, that being said, so if you started with that, that'd be 2024 till now. But I don't think that's fair because I don't think if I had been writing songs for other artists, I don't know, that would have happened. But I will say, I do think my trajectory is a little bit different than other folks. I moved right before the holidays of 2017. That's when I moved to town. It's interesting, you almost think about it in different chapters, from 2018 till 2020. When I look back on that era of my life, I was hosting different writers' rounds. I was writing during the day and just kind of learning the business, to be honest. 2020 happens, everything shuts down. I write a ton from 2020 to 2023. And I started getting a bunch of songwriting cuts and credits and all that jazz. I was kind of sandboxing a little bit over here for songs for me to sing. But to be real, whenever I first moved to town, which y'all know the years I just said, there hadn't been a lot of females, record deals, And I remember I was told by a fella in the industry that my best shot, I just moved to town. He said, your best shot at doing something here in town is to break as a songwriter first, then try your artistry. I don't know if it was accurate or not. I don't know. But I was like, okay, I'll try to do that, And so anyway, so like I was saying, 2017 to 2020 was really just getting my feet wet. 2020 to 2023 was really right for other folks. And then the pivot happened. It was July 24. I got off of my record deal September 2025. It takes a little piece once they offer the record deal. That was an exciting day, though.
Tell us what it felt like.
Yeah, it just felt bizarre. And, I remember whenever we took the picture, I don't know if y'all seen that picture or not, that they published, whenever it's the announcement or whatever. It felt so surreal because for years I'd see other announcements, like so-and-so signed to fill in the blank, and it was always really exciting because, of course, you can look at that kind of stuff, if you're songwriters or artists in different ways. You could choose to be jealous. You can choose to feel insecure. You can choose to be like, why not me? Or you can choose to be like, wow, that's attainable. If they can do it, maybe I can do it. And it is really, really, really neat. And I look at every single one of those people in that picture. There's a lot of talent. And they might just be faces and names, unless you've met them. But I feel very honored that, there's literally thousands of people in Nashville that are tremendously talented. And just to give y'all a mind thing on this is crazy. You know how I told y'all when I first moved to town, how I was hosting those writers' nights? Well, the last show that I hosted, it was at Tin Roof on Devon Brand. And I did that one right up until COVID. So I did that show for 10 months, okay? Just under 500 different people played it. It was like 490, something like that. Okay, 493, whatever. I kept running lists, and I like to have new people every week. So we didn't do a lot of duplicates. And we'd have normally 12 artists or so playing. Anyway, I would count on one hand people that shouldn't have been up there. Everyone was talented. Everyone was talented. Like, everyone was beautiful. Everyone had good songs. Everyone could sing. I mean, truly. And that was just my one little show. You know what I'm saying? And so I think about that sometimes. I was telling, my co-writers the other day, man, there are so many talented people that they never even get to walk into a publishing house or a record company, and it ain't because they're not talented. There's a lot of other pieces that go into it. And I feel really blessed, and I feel blessed that it happened when it did. We were talking about the tizzy of this thing. I brought up Bailey. And, I also, won't mention the names of the buddies that, maybe got deals and it went the other way. And, I hope that, of course, I did not have a little crystal ball or whatever, be like, tomorrow this will happen, or next year this will happen. But I would hope that seeing different folks that I really respect and love, some have done this or this or this, hopefully it's a little bit of a map. But it is a crazy town, though. I will say that.
All right. Well, coming off your record deal, there's this thing here we do called Unsung Heroes, where we take a moment to shine the light on somebody's work behind the scenes or somebody who may deserve a little bit of credit. Do you have anybody you'd like to thank for assisting you behind the scenes?
There's a man who I know I would not be here if it had been for him. He passed away right before I moved to town. His name was Kim Williams. And if y'all haven't heard about him, you should, because his story is crazy. So literally this fella, he lived in Eastern Tennessee. He worked at a glass factory. And when he was like 40, 45, there was an explosion at the factory. And he was like a legit burn victim. Like, as in, like, he had told me how many surgeries he had. It was like over 100 telomers. It was like, legit, like the horror story. Okay. Anyway, this was before I knew him, by the way. So he's from Eastern Tennessee, and he had to go to Vanderbilt to have all those surgeries. Well, while he was in Nashville, him and his wife had gotten one of those extended stay suites or whatever to stay or whatever. And he had seen, because he couldn't go back to work. I mean, he was basically he was bedridden at first, obviously, but then he just had to be sitting a lot, He saw this flyer for a free songwriting class. So that's cool. Can't do anything else. I just want to do that. Well, he fell in love with it and he started writing songs. Okay, I'll get to the chase. A friend of a friend introduced him to a guy, said you need to grab coffee with him. They grabbed coffee. The guy's name is Garth Brooks. This is right before Garth exploded, literally less than a year before. Kim and him become best friends. Kim wrote a ton of his hits. And Kim ended up becoming one of the top songwriters in the 90s and early 2000s. And I know they had some, hits in the 80s too. But I think the 90s was kind of his heyday. And I told him, name an artist, he probably had a hit with them. I mean, it was going on and on and on. And I have so much respect for both of y'all having this show. There's so many pieces that go into that folks do not even know about. And I wouldn't know about if I had not, before I moved to Nashville, I hosted a little radio show right outside Louisville, Kentucky, but have guests on, interview them, get to know them. It was really fun. Well, Kim came on the show. And as of course, as years later, he was already however many hits in. Well, I went to his log cabin. We did an on-location interview. After the interview, obviously I'd be in and out there in 20 minutes. Someone like me won't want to be hanging out with me. Well, his wife made us this big old breakfast. And 6 hours later, I'm still sitting with Kim. He's telling the story. And he says, hold on before you leave. And he pulls out his phone and a piece of paper and he writes down 9 names and numbers. And he hands it to him, or to me rather, and he says, you call these people, you tell them they either need to write with you, be on your show, or at least get coffee with you. And at that point, I was still up in Kentucky. I was solo writing something. I wasn't co-writing yet. And I didn't know who any of those people were. I didn't know the business at all, but now I do. They were all people from his class of songwriting. They were all legends. And 8 of the 9 of those people did one of those things. And that was kind of my introduction to Nashville. And, I've always revered him for years and years. I mean, even before I met him, I loved so many songs that he had written. He was a phenomenal storyteller. But I think what has stuck with me was his kindness. That sounds so cheesy, and I realized that I'm on Gouda for a second. But literally, he changed my life. It was a lot of those introductions. It was also just he did not have to even give me the time of day. I mean, he didn't need to be on my show, obviously. He didn't need to do that, but he did that and was so gracious and so kind. And he passed away literally right before, just a couple months before I moved down here. But I hope that he is looking down and he is proud, But I will say, obviously, as a songwriter, he is Mount Rushmore, just his face 4 times, Also, just of how to treat people. And it is really crazy, y'all. Time and time again, since I've been to Nashville, I'll be in a writing room or I'll be in a meeting where somehow he'll come up. I'll be, oh, you knew Kim? And every single time, y'all, it's in the same story where he has helped whoever I'm talking to and he changed their lives. And it's so wild. He has a name that probably very few people know, but he changed the trajectory of country music. I mean, literally, look him up later, Kim Williams, Kim Williams. But also, think about the lives he changed within the industry. It's wild.
That's amazing. I wish we had more time to talk to you. This was fantastic. Maybe we can get you to come back on again.
Absolutely.
On that note, folks, have a good night.
Thanks for listening to The Jay Franzi Show. Make sure you visit us at jfranzi.com. Follow, connect, and say hello. This episode has been brought to you by VR Knives, your source for 100% custom knives made by a true rock star. So, if you're in the market for a new piece of art, reach out to VR Knives. 407-421-5528. 407-421-5528.